So yes, to give you a little bit more background on myself, I did enter my first race in 2012 at the age of almost 54. And I can remember signing up and thinking, are you crazy? You're going to be 54 years old and you're going to get in a mountain bike race. And I have competed in sports most of my entire life. So played collegiate sports, was still playing competitive team sports into my middle 40s. My knees feel that, but that's basically why I went to a lot of cycling too. So I'm on the way to that race with that little shit fairy that she talked about, trying to talk myself out of it, going, you must be crazy. Some of your family thinks you're crazy, you know, what are you doing? But I did the race, and it was a 9-mile race, and I thought that was a really long time to be on a bike. I trained for it up to that point, and then realized, hey, I could do it. I did the right things to get there. By the next year, I was ready to do 6-hour endurance races and so forth and so on. Because that's what we started to have around here. It was just starting to get big. So my point to you with a lot of that is, the years before that, I sat for 2.5 years because I had 2 shoulder surgeries and then another surgery that ended up to be fine, but really sat. I can remember walking with my little, if anybody's ever seen anybody with a rotator cuff bicep tendons, putting my little pillow on and taking walks in the neighborhood. So the first thing I'd tell you is the action, take the first steps. And that's what we're going to, I hopefully give you today, some things that you can do, especially in the situation we all are right now. You're at home, maybe your plans were, okay, can't go to the gym, what am I going to do? Well, I hope today I can show you some things that you can do. You can see behind me, I have my own gym. I used to train people out of here, young athletes, adults, whatever, and have had this in place since 20 whatever. When I was with Xerox, which I did for 20 years, I went to the gym, but decided to do, when I went into the training, which in 2001, I became an ACE personal trainer, American Council on Exercise. In 2004, I decided, you know what, I really want to work with athletes. And I was already working with Northern Kentucky University women's basketball team. So I got the certification in the CSCS, which is basically working with athletes, injury prevention, performance in sports, in different disciplines. So that's when I kind of transitioned to this, and have been doing that consistently for the last, let's say, 18 years. And what I'd like to talk to you today is how I got to here. I started here, and that's what I'm going to say. In August 22nd, you're going to get to here, wherever your goals are. Danielle did a great job taking you through your values and your goals. So whether it's here, you know, I want to participate. I want to finish. I want to go on to nationals, whatever that be, and wherever you're at on your journey now, we can get you on the right step. So for a lot of us, we might be starting here. And then what we'll do is we'll build the blocks to take you here, to here, to here. And everybody's in a little bit different space, so it'll depend on how much training volume you've already been doing. Some of you are probably, I'm going to guess, mountain bikers. For instance, if I were going to do that race, I wouldn't have to spend a ton more time on my mountain bike skills. I've got that down pat. But I sure as heck would have to do some more hiking, and I'd really have to learn, and I'd ask for Steph and Danielle's help on that. I'd have to learn how to paddle right, because I'm sure I don't do that. So the skills wise, you're going to have to find out where, you know, where you need the most work there. And when I show you some of those and share some of these sheets later on, I'll be loading those up so Steph can put them on the Unbridled site, and I'll put them on my, if you go to my Got Dirt page and like it, I'll share it there. So how do we do that? How do we build volume? Number one thing I'm going to say to you first off is don't look at miles, look at hours. Let's look at hours of training. That way we don't get caught up in, I got to get 100 miles in. Instead, I've got to get quality of hours of training in. And I'm going to talk about 2 aspects of it. And that, the first one, and again, wearing different hats, but having the certifications for them. I'm going to talk about, you know, how do we do the cycling or endurance training part? How do we build that? How do we progress that? And inside of that, they're really similar blocks, is the strength training. So for a lot of us, we're going to start with a basic training, and they kind of go hand in hand. So if I'm starting out in that endurance training, I'm going to start with a lower volume of hours, whether it's 3 hours or you're already at 6 hours. If you're out walking and doing things, then maybe you're at that 6-hour period. If you're just starting out, and I think somebody said it before, we're just getting off the couch. This is our adventure. We're going to do this. So we're going to get up and we're going to start. We're going to take that first step. And that first step might be, I'm going to start to walk. I'm going to start to hike. So we're going to kind of plan that out. The biggest thing I would tell you is to start the strength training program right now, and you can do that in your house. And the reason for that is the basic that we start with is called the base training. It's anatomical adaptations, but really just think of, hey, I got to get the basics down, whether it be cycling, hiking, paddling, or strength training. So what that means is there's 5 to 6 different types of building blocks throughout. And depending on, whose program you look at and whatever, but just know that you're really starting out with some base, getting the base down, getting aerobic endurance, getting some basic strength moves, learning the right way to squat and hinge, things like that. And most importantly, doing corrective exercises, because everything we do is pretty linear in those sports, right? We're getting those hips all locked up, our hip flexors. And what Katie took you through on yoga is great, because she's opening up those hip flexors and doing a lot of corrective exercises in yoga. So if you are a yoga person, that's awesome. I've not been a steady yoga person, but I do a lot of those same stretches, which I'll be happy to share with you too. And that way I open those hip flexors up, because the worst thing you can do is go bike or go paddle, go hike, and then go sit in that car for an hour on the drive home. Good. So the base, what we're looking at, just to start out, if you're just starting a strength program, that's going to be, if you've never done strength training before, I'm going to say just do 2 sets of these exercises. And there's only 6 to 8 exercises. And you'll do that 2 to 3 times a week. So if you've never done it before, start at 2. If you've already been working out in a different program, start at the 3 times a week right now. And then again, this will change to the different blocks of that training. And you really do need to know, it was great what your goals are for that. So for me, my base training, because I was planning on racing next month, that's been pushed back to October. I was in my base back in December. Now I was in my strength maintenance phase. So that, again, was a very light training, almost body weight. So kind of give you that idea how you go. So base, but then, in January, I was lifting heavier weights, less reps, and so forth. And then inside of that, the cycling is going to change along with that. So back in December, I was doing a lot of just getting miles in and staying in that endurance phase where I wasn't getting my heart rate up real high. So building my aerobic endurance. So they all go hand in hand. And again, it's that building blocks of training and that progression. And then we go through the different phases too. Will be, then you get into, okay, let's talk about explosive. But that doesn't come until you get all your bases in. So you get your corrective exercise, then you get your strength in. Excuse me, all this rain is killing my allergies. Then you come here, and then you can talk about, okay, now how do we get that speed, that explosiveness? But that doesn't come until we build all this. And if you just get to the base and the strength, you're going to be way ahead. The explosiveness and the speed, I think with Neil talking about it, a lot of us, if we can just get to the corrective exercise and the base strength, it will give us a great leadway in not only our performance, but the biggest thing with endurance racing is injury prevention. So that's really what we're trying to get to. And then through the program, we're going to look, okay, that specialization. And I'm in my peak phase way up here where, let's say I was ready to race in a month. right now I'd be looking, okay, what's going on with my body? What do I need help with? What's that specialization I need to kind of really dial in right now? So, you know, maybe it's I'm getting tight here. So is it my hamstrings or is it my hip flexors? Am I not doing enough lateral things? Am I not working on my gluteus medius? So those are things that I'd look at that point. And then your peak, you know, peak is race time. So we dial it back. If you've been in, you know, a marathoner or a runner, you taper. Yeah, we dial it back so that we're more rested for our event. So we'll look at that come, you know, the beginning of August. So you'll start to dial back your thing. And I'm not sure, Steph, if you can let me know if you can see this. I don't have chat on, but that is kind of me laying out my goals. Are you able to see that, Stephanie?
Yeah, can't read it, but
that's okay. I'll share that. So basically, in the beginning of the year, December, I define my goals. What are my goals? And I love the value added. Thank you, Danielle, because I need to look at that too. So, you know, mine was compete, win age. That's easy because I'm usually one in my 60+ age group. But so the 6-hour mountain bike races, and I also do cyclocross. So, you know, I want to compete in nationals in my age group, and time trials in England Idlewild, things like that. And then I look at what are my training objectives. So we talk about action items, and then I look at, hey, what are my limiters? What are my weaknesses? What do I need to improve in? Where can I get better? So, you know, she talked a lot about that, and I've always looked at it too. Is I'm going to do the best I can do with what I have. I'm going to do my best every day. So, you know, going through 2 shoulder surgeries and all that, I have some physical limiters, but I do the best that I can with that. 2 knee surgeries. So I adapt my training to that and look at last year I had foot surgery in January, so I was on crutches for a month. So, you know, I didn't have the same expectations that I did the year before where I trained a full year. So I did the best that I could with what I had last year. And then looking at your cycling training plan, you're going to do the same thing. So again, I'm going to block that off. And again, you can't see that, but I'll share it. So basically what I did was look at in your cycling training plan, that would be basically you would look at your endurance training plan. So you're going to have to add in the hiking and the paddling, and then work on the orienteering, which I would be lost in the woods. So I'm going to pay attention to Steph's lesson on that. But then you're going to look at, okay, where do I need more work, and plan through that. So, and then the other thing is there's a lot of different exercises. So as I said, right now in our endurance training part, you're just going to be looking at some hours, getting in some hours hiking, getting some hours in paddling if possible, getting some hours in on the bike. And then later on through our blocks is where we'll start to add intensity and duration and strength and speed work, things like that. So the intervals. So you don't want to start out trying to pound it. You want to build to that. And for you all, if there's people that haven't been cyclists, and Steph's going to talk about that, I think in the next half hour, we'll have more sessions on it. You have to build up that bike time, and I'm sure even in kayaking, that seated time on in the kayak or when you're paddling. So don't go out and think I'm going to do a 3-hour ride if you haven't been on a bike, because your little sit bones and other privates will really feel that. So caution you there, build, build, build. We do that, look at, you know, increasing, rule of thumb is usually 10 to 15%. So it really, you know, kind of depends on that. And then the other thing that is key is that we build in the recovery periods or restorative periods. And that can be a yoga day, because that's very restorative to our body. That's the stretching. That can be me. I have in the background my Wahoo kicker trainer back there. That can be spinning on that where I only get my heart rate up to 94, which, you know, is not very high for me. So, and everybody's heart rate's different. So we can talk about that in another session, how we set those zones in it. Yes.
Hey, Liv, Sarah's asking, when you say 10 to 15% escalation, you're talking about the amount of time of training?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So in other words, to give you an example, and now remember, as I progressed through my training in January, my weeks were probably more like 5 hours. And now mine's just on the bike right now. That's not counting my strength training. 5 hours on the bike, and then 6 hours on the bike. And then I went back down to 4 hours. And then throughout the year, I've escalated to where the last week was up to 11 hours on the bike. Thought I was still racing. And actually 10 hours. And then the week before that, I was 7.5. So there's my restorative, right? So you can't go 11, 11, 11, 11. You have to recover. And that's the same thing with strength training. That's why we recommend that you do it every other day, basically. There are workarounds to that, and we'll get into that in another session. But the reason that is if you keep going hard every day, you're not giving your body time to recover. We're actually tearing down our muscles when we're out there pedaling, doing hill repeats. If I try and do hill repeats 2 or 3 days in a row, I'm just tearing my body down, tearing my body down. I'm not giving it time to rebuild. Does that help answer that question? So, yeah, good. So then, so that brings us to that. So if you are in your 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, that's great. You can go a little bit harder and maybe just build in one recovery day. I found after the age of 55 for me that I really, in starting to get closer to that 60 number, I needed 2 days of recovery. And that is a suggestion from some of the experts in the field of cycling and just, overall for master athletes. Usually about the age of 50, we start to say, okay, we probably need a little bit more recovery. So my program right now builds in 2 days. And one of those can be yoga or just stretching. And it can also be the easy spin on the bike since I've been doing it for a while. If you're a novice to all this and you haven't been doing a lot of it, then you might need a true recovery day that might include, massage or chiropractor. Right now, that's not an option to you. Close those offices because I use a chiropractor myself this time of year, twice a month. But I do have some options for you for the massage and things like that can help you get through. Because that's a big part of it too, is recovery. Yes.
So I have another question. Let's assume that I'm just getting started, that this winter I've worked 50 to 60 hours a week. And so, my training has been sitting behind my desk. Like, what does my very first workout look like?
Great lead in. So that's what we're going to talk about. So, why we do it, I think is real important. And that's basically where this today is going to show you is, number one, it's injury prevention. So let's start doing the injury prevention now, not when we have injuries. I call it prehabilitation instead of rehabilitation exercises. And we're restoring weaknesses, if you've already been doing it, caused by movement. And I'll talk to you, but I'll even cover other options besides my weights and all my modalities and things I have back here. What you can do if you don't have that at home, since we're in this situation now. What it's not is finding the next crazy thing out on the internet or the web or YouTube. You got to be careful what you follow. I say if they don't have the shirt on, it's probably don't follow it. It's not loaded jumps. It's not plyometrics before you build the base strength. So if somebody, your friend tells you, hey, do jump squats, that'll be good. Don't do split squat jumps, jump squats. Don't do box jumps until you at least build that base. And then you only do them at this certain, remember our steps, our progression? Then I'm only doing those here. Then I'm not going to do them, right? So right now I wouldn't be doing those if I were racing next month. And then it's not bodybuilding exercises. It's not a lot of volume. Remember when I went back to, it's 6 to 8 exercises and 2 to 3 times a week. So we're going to start out with, regaining our functionality and balancing out with some corrective exercises. And again, the yoga is nothing but corrective exercises to me. So I should get on that bandwagon, I know. And we'll keep those corrective exercises throughout that entire training block. There's an exercise called the clamshell that I do all the time because cycling is so linear, and a lot of us, I don't, but a lot of you probably have work where you're sitting at a desk like this, right? So again, let's get those hip flexors opened up. Let's work that gluteus medius, which gets neglected. So we'll start with that base phase. And again, I'll kind of show you here. So you see I have a lot of different, these are sand bells. You can see the dumbbells. And again, I used to train people out. Dakota back there in the background is not much for training if you can see him. Plates, whatever you have to pick up that's a weight. So I don't have to have kettlebells. This works. That works as a kettlebell, right? So if you're doing that, think of what you might have at your home that can work for you. So, and the reason we want to do these is you get a lot of lower back pain, you get a lot of tight hip flexors. So this base period, these corrective are to open those up. And again, shoulder, neck, both on the bike, right? And with paddling. So we want to make sure we go ahead and prehabilitate those so we don't have to rehabilitate those later on for our training. And one of the things with biking, and you'll see that if you look at road cyclists, their shoulders are in like this, right? Because here's their position, especially road, because there's dropped handlebars. I never even had, well, I had a road bike in high school and college. That was my transportation, but haven't had a road bike until 2012 because I figured out, hey, if I want to do some of these races and the endurance ones and trails are closed, maybe I should get one of those cyclocross bikes. But mountain bike, we're like this, right? So our chest is taking a lot of that too. So even then though, the shoulders you can see around it. So what corrective exercises do I need to pull those shoulders back and correct that weakness? So a lot of rows and things like that. So part of what we'll start out with in that training would be to work the things that we need. So I look at strength trainings, we're going to try and equal out. So you're asking what they can do at home. The first thing would be to do a lot of single leg exercises and a lot of single arm exercises and a lot of balance. So we try and do exercises that work on all three. So they're going to work on my strength, but they're also more importantly going to work on my stability and my mobility. And I say single arm because a lot of us have a non-dominant leg, or an dominant leg. I'll show you this quick. That's going to be hard to see. That picture is of me going down these gnarly rocks, going up this gnarly dip at East Fork. And I like to say that I look at that and say, okay, how do I train for that to make sure that, when that race comes around or this time of year comes around and trails are open, how do I make sure I am? So, this is my position. So how do I make sure that I've got both legs strong? My dominant leg is my left leg. I've had 2 knee surgeries on the right, and I'm right-handed. So I'm used to balancing on my left because when I started playing kickball, I kicked with the right, I balanced on the left. I did layups, same thing. So that is my dominant, especially with the knee surgery. So I need to do some things to get the right leg dominant because I come around that bend, I don't always know that left foot's going to be in front for one. So how do I do that? And this is especially important with hiking. I was fortunate enough to be in Arizona back in early February, seems like forever ago, and did some hiking. And believe me, going up on this right foot, it needs more work. I know I'm not as confident and as strong. So what I'll do is work on that even more. So I do a lot of single leg, especially single leg deadlifts. And, I have the kettlebells. You don't have to have the kettlebells. So what can you do? We all went out and got water. Here's a kettlebell, right? So I can sit there and do my single leg deadlift with a jug of water. And then single leg deadlift with the right. You can also use that same jug. Nice flat back for a row. Single arm though, because I want to make sure that we correct those imbalances with that. And then we'll also do a lot of work with the quads. So when we talk about strength training, we're going to go, what do we look at? Our core is going to be, really people think, here's my core, you know, what's my six-pack look like? No, core is knees to chest, knees to chest. Everything I move in there is the core. So how do I work that? And that's really key in all the sports we're talking about, and all the disciplines of the mountain biking, the paddling especially, right? And the hiking. Because your core is really what holds everything together. So if you have a weak core, it doesn't matter to me how strong your shoulders, arms, quads are. You've got to get the core working together, and that's even the glutes and hip flexors in that. So a lot of the exercises that I'll do are even split squats or step ups. So split squats, or some people will call them just stationary lunge, up, down. See if you can see it better this way. So I'm just going to go up, down, and I can hold weights or not hold weights for now. If you haven't ever done them, I'm going to say, let's just do body weight exercises for now. Again, that progression, that working up to it. But I like those because I see people want to do squats with heavy weight, and there's just so much chance of injury. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of things we can do with single leg that's going to benefit you a lot more than seeing that you can squat double your weight or bench press your weight, things like that. When I do bench press, again, I'm going to do a lot of, I also program a lot of combination lifts so you get your best bang for your buck. So if I'm going to do a bench press, I'm going to have you do a single arm. So now this one's working as a shoulder stabilizer. So now I'm stabilizing your shoulder for the sport of mountain biking and paddling. So those are things that are programmed into those 6 to 8 exercises. And when I do core, one of the ones that I do like is the Russian twist, where you're seated on the ground. As long as you have a straight spine, and that's number one in all the lifting, make sure that your spine's always straight. That's the spine, neck to the tailbone, nice and straight. People get in trouble when they round the back and they end up pulling things. So a nice straight spine for that. And then the other things I really like are, and you know, the medicine balls. I have this, now I make do with what I have down here. My walls are drywall. I don't think I want to throw this against there, but I have this it's an older basement that was a steel post under there, so I think I'm okay. So I just try and make sure my wife Lisa's not on a conference call when I'm doing that upstairs. It's a little loud, but that's the vertical core that you'll see programmed a lot, because I think that's a lot more beneficial to us than the seated type of core. So stay away from the crunches that we all grew up doing, the sit-ups. Those tend to, unless you have perfect form, really can almost do more damage to our spine and neck than the vertical core. Another vertical core that's a really good one is just a pelvic press. And again, these bands are great if you, now we're not to go to the grocery, or we'll need to go to the grocery. So while you're at that grocery, go to Meijer, go to Walmart, you'll find this band in their fitness aisle for, I don't know, $7.99. So here's a great exercise. What am I working on? I'm working on my balance, and well, I'm not back far enough. Working on my balance, and I'm doing my one-arm row. Now you'll see, for me, that right leg, I can have more trouble with it. So, and then the other thing is just, I can use this for a million things. So years ago even, and this probably is that old, I went to Alaska with my mom and dad were still living, and I went with them on an 11-day. No gym. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? We don't have a gym. We were on our cruise for 3, and then it was a land for another 7. I brought this with me, did an entire workout. So you can use that all different ways, and that's a very economical option for you. Some of the other things that I think are great, if you want a home gym, you could probably still order this on Amazon. This is, you all probably heard of suspension trainers. Everybody usually hears TRX. This one's called the Jungle Gym. It actually rated higher for durability, and it was under $100. So I have that bolt it into my rafters and use that down here. It can also be put in a door jamb. So I train people, not now, but have before, in their homes. I bring that, we put it in the door, we can do an entire work with a suspension trainer. So those are some of the things you can do. Some of the other things I do on the bike. So 2 days ago, or let's see, Tuesday I did hill repeats. I live up by NKU, so I live on top of a hill. I think we're about 950 feet up. So any which way I go is downhill, so I have it very close to home where I can do those. And that's great. I get my heart rate up on pedaling. Different times in my progression, that block, I start out doing seated hill repeats at 80% of my effort. And then till, you know, as I get towards that peak, the top of my block of training, then I'm going to do standing hill repeats, maybe at 110%. But the thing that I do to get my legs ready for mountain biking specifically is when I'm going down the hill, instead of staying seated, I'll stand. So I start to get those legs ready. And then I'll switch legs and I'll start to get that right leg used to being in front. So I try to work on that non-dominant. And that's going to be true of the upper body too. Any questions on?
Yeah.
Any,
I've got a question, because we've got just a few minutes left in this session. We'll need to wrap up. So if I'm going out for that first workout outdoors, I'm going to go out for my first bike ride to start my training plan. If I'm starting from, you know, zero, like how long should my first workout be? Like my first bike ride, for instance.
I would say if your first bike ride, try and stay up for an hour. You know, I think you're gonna talk about the right gear too, so that makes a big difference. And then you can build from there. And then, so part of that block of training is, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but at the bottom it shows kind of, so there's the strength training and then the endurance training block at the bottom. So for instance, this is for somebody that's maybe been at it, you know, Monday's at recovery, then Tuesday I'm going to try and do a 45-minute bike ride, a very low endurance type of ride. And then on Wednesday I'm hiking or paddling for an hour. And then, you know, Thursday might be a rest day if we're just starting out. And then in between there on Tuesdays and Thursdays or Tuesdays and Fridays, do the strength training. So you can do those in the same days. If possible, I would spread them out. So
it sounds like during the week, if I've got 45 minutes to an hour, that's enough for me to start my training program.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and you know, if nothing else, right now, get out and walk and hike, and bike. I mean, you're able to get out there and do that. And if you can get out to start to do the paddling, that's great too. The key is, if you're starting from, I'm not doing anything right now, just make sure you build that slowly. Just get out and take the first step, take the first hike, take the first pedal stroke. Real quick, I'll show you some other things. If you don't have equipment, I'm going to turn and hopefully you can see my steps now. And I can use these. So if I don't have equipment, there's my step up. There's my step up. Maybe I start there. The other thing I'll tell you is use different angles in your training too. So I'm going to step at an angle because if I was hiking, I would be stepping at an angle. I'm not going to hike all the time straight up and down, right? And then the other thing I'll talk about quick. Can you see me all right, Steph?
Yeah.
Okay. But moving that camera is kind of dangerous for me. So the other thing we'll talk about are some restorative that I would put in every day. So a roller, it doesn't have to be a lumpy one. Actually, I have another one where I leave it up behind my TV because I'm watching the news at night or whatever program. I pull that out and it's behind my big flat screen. Nobody sees it. And I'll actually foam roll every night before I go to bed. You can use the foam roller before. That helps get the muscles a little bit more fluid and moving, but especially once a day, and that works for me. So put it somewhere, get it somewhere so that you'll use it, right? If I keep it down here and only down here, I'm gonna go, oh, I'm too tired, I don't wanna go down in the basement. The other things that I'll use are lacrosse balls, even softballs. because right now I can't get to my chiropractor, so I can use that lacrosse ball to get knots out of my shoulders and roll them. You can use the softball there. I use it a lot for my glutes. I'm sitting on the ground because I find that's where I have trouble in the piriformis, those tight glutes, so that helps get some of the knots out there. And then there's the Graston, a tool like this, where I can also use that if my forearms get tight from holding on the bike. It's what my chiropractor will use sometimes with me. So that's that myofascial release that kind of builds up and we need to take care of. One other thing, I want to do some deadlifts and I don't, the gallon or I need more weight. I have this little basket here and now put that in there and I've got other stuff in there. I now got a little bit heavier of weights. So get creative with that. Cans, I gotta do some. So part of my program for that base would be, let's do some lateral raises for the shoulders. You don't have weights. These cans work great. They're, I don't know if they're, I guess, a pound. So good. So that kind of wraps up what I was covering. And the biggest key I think to take away is that the program builds over time. And you have to have restorative and rest days each week, and restorative in anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. And that doesn't mean you take off a week. That means you back down a week so that you recover. Does that make sense?